We'll come back to a very simple topic and probably what is mostly seen by all of you at all stages of your life. And I'm here to simplify it for you so that most of it gets tackled at your end rather than get referred to my end. So, why are we so very much concerned about the red eye? Because the patient finds it offending as everybody mentions it. Okay, most of the times you get phone calls saying my eye is red, and I realized it because so many of my colleagues at office told me it's red. Patient has not realized it, but 10 people have told him it is red, so he wants something to be done about it. Okay. Second thing is he gives you a phone call because he wants a magic cure. He'll say it's red and I can't see you, but I would like to know what drops to put. So that is magic cure, because unless I have seen it and I prescribe something and it goes away, it's magic, isn't it? Because my clinical acumen is 0 and I have just prescribed him some drops and it's gone away. He finds his family physician who would then prescribe the magic drops if I don't give it to him. Okay? And most of the times his wish comes true till we open the Pandora's box for you and here it is. Okay? So we have two types of congestions. One is the conjunctival congestion and second is the circumcorneal congestion. When we see a red eye, we have to differentiate between the two because we are here now going into two different levels of diagnosis. Okay, when we talk of conjunctival congestion, the whole eye is red. You have the vessels in an arborizing pattern which extend throughout the eye right from the fornix up to the cornea. It is bright red in color and of course the patient is going to have symptoms of redness, pain and watering. On the other hand, you have circumcorneal congestion which will be just around the cornea. The fornices will be clear and here the patient is going to have redness, pain, watering and along with that probably a drop in vision. So the main differentiating point between the two would be the color and second is the vision. If you could differentiate between these two and the pattern and location, in conjunctival congestion you would have it all around the eye. In circumcorneal congestion, as the name suggests, it will be just around the cornea. So one is the pattern, second is the color. Conjunctival would be bright red, the other one would be bluish to dull red. And third is the vision. If the patient tells you my vision is fine, believe me, 9 out of 10 times it will be just conjunctivitis, but if he says his vision is not same, believe me, it is not going to be conjunctivitis and it doesn't get treated at your level. So once the patient says my vision has dropped, there are other methods of investigation which will tell you what is the diagnosis. So we go further. As I've already told you, in conjunctivitis, it will be redness, pain, watering, and a good vision with a miserable patient because the foreign body sensation is so bad. And especially when you can see something, then you complain about other things. If you're not seeing, then you don't complain about the redness, you don't complain about the pain, you don't complain about the watering because you can't see. Then the priority is I can't see. But the minute the patient says it's red, it's hurting me, it's miserable, this, that, but doesn't complain about vision, you know it is conjunctivitis. Okay? Look for lids and ocular adnexia. You'll have some lashes which might be abrading the cornea which can cause redness. So if you just do a torch examination, you will find that the redness can be because of the eyelashes which are rubbing against the cornea and the conjunctiva. Here the patient is going to tell you it's hurting me and it is red, and at the same time I'm not comfortable with whatever is happening. Some of them will come regularly to you for epilating these eyelashes. There is a permanent cure for it rather than do it every... Okay. They'll come to you every 15 days to a month. Rather than that, there is a permanent cure for everting these eyelashes rather than abrading the cornea. Sometimes they'll come and tell you there's redness at the corner of my eye. There's nothing there, it's just a dermoid. He's not noticed it before, but maybe some inflammation or something which has made it increase in size, and he suddenly notices in front of the mirror and he'll come and tell you, I'm sure it was not there, but it is there since the last 1 week. If we don't know that we are looking at a dermoid, we'll probably go and investigate unnecessarily as to what it is all about. Okay? The clue is lack of congestion in the central area of the eye. Most of the times it may be a dermoid, but sometimes you could have a parasitic cyst. So if you have a parasitic cyst, then you have to take the history as to when it started and whether there is waxing and waning in the size of the cyst. If you find that, then it is definitely inflammatory, and here you cannot make a diagnosis unless you have done a USGB scan or a CT scan, because you would like to know whether the parasitic cyst exists at other places other than where you have seen it. most of the time the treatment over there is just medical line of treatment. So you spend a lot on investigations and then give him mebendazole, for which he hardly spends anything, and he says, you did so many investigations, doctor, and ultimately just a few medicines and I am better. Okay. The other part is when the patient has a foreign body. He'll come to you with a foreign body. It's nice to use magnification to remove a foreign body, because by the time the patient comes to you, it's already 2 or 3 days. The epithelium has grown over the foreign body. You can't just remove it with the foreign body spud or a swab stick. So with magnification, you can use a fine instrument like a needle or something, which is disposable. Never use an autoclaved one. During our residency days, still all this was hammered into us. We used to have a lot of corneal ulcers because of, some autoclave needle having been used to remove a foreign body. So a disposable needle under magnification and you can get rid of the foreign body. The result is more inflammation. If the patient tries to remove it by himself, the result would be they would use water to do that, or they would try to use some instrument or some foreign body swab stick to remove the foreign body, and the result would be more inflammation, infection, as the tap water is not even potable, leave alone, put it into your eye. And if there is a defect which gets secondarily infected, you would get a corneal ulcer. So better left to specialists. Sometimes the redness is because of a tear. Some people will come and tell you, I was playing with a pencil or something like that and something went into my eye, but then after that I was fine. This is what it is all about. He was fine for some time till the corneal tear started manifesting with all its problems. Then he gets a red eye. So he says, I must have got conjunctivitis, but actually it's a corneal tear. And here the patient can end up with a loss of vision because of endophthalmitis or a traumatic cataract. So if somebody comes to you with some blunt trauma and says it's just casual, just like look into with a torch and see if there's any other finding into the eye. Sometimes you will get perforations, like you see over here, a perforation which cannot be stitched. It's a round perforation and you cannot stitch it. The minute you take a stitch, you are going to change the axis, you're going to induce a lot of astigmatism. So there are other ways and means of doing it. Don't ignore it. You can still give a good result and a central 6x6 vision if patient comes to you at the right time. Some mild keratitis, either because of infection, trauma, or some inherent endogenous infection, and you will see there is a white spot on the cornea. If it is associated with circumcorneal congestion, then it needs to be referred, because then there are various etiologies for the same. It could not be just trauma or something like that. You would need to look into the history of the patient and probably even investigate further. Corneal ulcers, the minute you see a hypopion, out of your reach, because now the organism is very virulent, no time to lose, you need to treat it very aggressively, and that too with microbiological investigations. Okay? How do we differentiate between different types of corneal ulcers? A little difficult, but if you can see multiple spots, like we call them as satellite lesions, it's usually fungal. And if you see a frank hypopion, it's usually bacterial. That is what we would expect at the level, at the primary level where you look at a patient. But the best diagnosis is only after a microbiological investigation. Viral dendritic ulcers, if you see at the top picture, you can't make out it is a viral ulcer. But when you stain it, the diagnosis is absolutely clear. So you need special stains plus magnification of a slit lamp to detect. The naked eye cannot see it. And the only thing at our level, when we are first seeing the patient, is to do the corneal sensations. If they are diminished, it is usually viral. Okay? If there is a vision drop, patient says, yesterday I was fine and today I am not fine. I have acute pain and there is a drop in vision. Put a torch and see. If the pupil is dilated and there is corneal edema, it is glaucoma. Okay, now this needs to be referred, because the pressures in the eye, when they should normally be around 17 millimeters, here would be somewhere around 50-60 millimeters of mercury, and the patient can lose vision if not treated on time. All right? Next you have iridocyclitis. If you can see this difference between the two eyes, you will see that one of the eyes is clear, cornea is having a good luster, pupil is reacting. On the other side, the pupil is not reacting and the cornea is hazy. Okay, if you go on the slit lamp, you will see the findings. The pupil is festoon, meaning the pupil is attached at some places as a result of which it is not circular in shape. And you can see lot of cells into the anterior chamber, which are those white things. Now, all this is not possible at the naked eye level. It has to be seen on a slit lamp. Last but not the least, endophthalmitis. It could be post-operative, or it could be because of infection somewhere within the body. Some of the patients have HIV, some of the patients have endogenous infections. They are on long-term steroids. They could end up with multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. They could have fungal infections within the body. All that can give rise to this even without a surgery. So, if it is post-surgical, you are looking out for infection. If it is not post-surgical, then you have to investigate aggressively to find out what is the cause, because unless you treat the cause, this is not going to go away. All right? So if it is post-surgical, again, conjunctival pulmonary congestion, a drop in vision, a hypopyon seen, corneal clarity lost, and needs treatment immediately. Sometimes patient gets operated, and for follow-up, if the operating doctor is not available, might come to you for a follow-up. So in those cases, if you see something like that, even if the concerned operating surgeon is not available, please refer to somebody else, because there is no time to be lost. Sometimes it is something very simple, a subconjunctival hemorrhage. Now this was a patient of corneal transplant we had operated, and middle of the night he gave me a call and said, my eye is red, my eye is red. I need to see you immediately. Now a corneal transplant is something you don't want to risk. So in the middle of the night he come and showed me, and all it was a subconjunctival hemorrhage because he had high blood pressure. So sometimes a patient of high blood pressure will come to you with red eyes only because there is a subconjunctival hemorrhage. And when you see that a patient has chronic red eyes, most of the times, of course, drinking is a habit which gives you red eyes, but otherwise it is better to check the blood pressure. I had a patient who used to regularly come to me, and the first question I would ask him, what is your routine blood pressure? He would say, it's 140/80, doctor, it's never high. Then on the third visit when he said, but your treatment is not working on me, so what's wrong? I mean, are you sure you're treating me right? I said, wait, now today I need to take your blood pressure. And he was 240/120. So it is possible that the patient gives you some finding which is not true. So always go back and check, and you will know where you are going wrong, okay? Some you have drug allergies. This is a patient of Stevens-Johnson syndrome. The minute you see these patients, please refer to consultants. There is no time to be lost. Today we have measures whereby you can prevent the detrimental effects of Stevens-Johnson, where people used to lose eyesight. Today we can save them, and we can make them as comfortable as possible with amniotic membrane transplants and stem cell transplants, which are required, apart from the routine steroid therapy which is required to suppress the inflammation. Okay? Again, as Akshay told you about thyroid eye disease, when you see a red eye, it could just be sometimes hypothyroidism. So even if you don't have a lid retraction, you may have a red eye. And if that red eye exists, it means that we have to look into other systemic factors too. So you could be dealing with thyroid eye disease in case of a red eye. You have patients of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis who have red eye, band keratopathies, and repeated grafts done. So, as I told you, the Pandora's box is unlimited. A red eye is not something which is just conjunctivitis. There are many, many more things to it. And for anything to be diagnosed beyond a conjunctivitis, it has to be seen on specialized equipments. So the minute your patient doesn't get better in a few days, it is better to refer and check out what it is and get the diagnosis. You have chemical burns. Today I am showing you the picture of a patient on the left who's come to me with chronic chemical burns, and this is what we have treated. After multiple amniotic membrane transplants, stem cell transplants, and a final keratoplasty, we managed to deliver 6/18 vision, that is 4 lines of vision. So everything is possible. So if you see something like that, please refer, because today we can really deliver good things to the patient, okay? Thank you very much. I think I'll continue with my second talk on management of squint, which is little varied from what I talked just now on. But since that is the branch that I specialize at Ayush Eye Clinic, I would like to highlight that branch. I would like to thank Dr. Neeta Shah for giving me this opportunity to manage squints in her clinic, because though she knows how to do them, she has appointed me to do them for her. So I would really go in for a round of applause for her for being so kind to her juniors. There's nothing that she can't do, but she has segregated her branches so that everybody gets to do a piece of work in her clinic. Okay, now we are dealing with dilemmas and myths of a patient and the relatives. Some of the dilemmas are that the patient comes to you at a time period and says, I was told it is not correctable. Yeah, slightly. I was told this is not correctable. You know, he comes at marriageable age to me and they say that we went to a doctor when she was small, but they told us it cannot be corrected. So that is why we never bothered to do anything about it. But now she's into the market for marriage and nobody is willing to get married to a girl with a squint. So do something about it. Now what couldn't be done at the age of 6? Can it be done at the age of 21? But it is expected at the age of 21, but not expected at the age of 6. Because the need is at the age of 21. Nobody is bothered about the vision of the child. Okay? Some of them will say, in our community is considered to be lucky, so we don't operate. I have heard all these things, that's why I'm telling you. So let the child grow up and it will settle down. Some of the consultants will tell them that. How will it settle down? I don't know. Some of them will tell the child is too small, don't bother now, let him grow up, then we'll see what is to be done. In the meantime, every 6 months you come and show me, I will see whether it is progressing or no. Every 6 months, if you don't know right now what is to be done, what you're going to tell after 6 months, I don't know. And some of them will say, don't bother as it may worsen his eye status. So just be happy with what you have. She can say no, so don't bother. So these are some of the myths I would like to correct because it is causing damage to the child with these statements that we make. A patient walks into our clinic, whether we are general practitioners, family physicians, ophthalmologists, orthopedic surgeons, the trust that he places in us, he expects us to tell whether this is correctable or no. By us, by somebody else is not the concern. So if we can give them the correct advice, I think half the job would be done. Why we possibly need to refer? It is that squint is purely due to a refractive error. Sometimes you just have one eye which is 6/6, other eye which is -14. Now the eye with -14 will have a squint. Now if you give these previous advices which I told you, that -14 is never going to get corrected and that eye is going to go amblyopic, means that the eye is going to lose vision. But if we refer to somebody and he detects it is -14 and corrects it, probably the squint gets corrected as well as the vision gets corrected. So the first thing to do when you see a squint is to send the child for a refractive error correction, because some of these squints get corrected only by refractive error corrections. So correct the refractive error and poof, the squint disappears. So again, there is some magic factor in it. It sometimes needs to be corrected early to prevent loss of vision. If we have a squint which is present only in one eye and it is not alternating, that means that eye vision will go down because that eye is not fixing at all. I am fixing with only one eye and the other eye is out. So if the other eye is not going to see at all, a certain point or time will come when the brain will say this eye is not seeing, so it refuses to see even when you correct it. So we need to correct the squint to preserve vision in that eye, to correct a vision which exists as a refractive error, and to give binocular vision to the patient. So squint under all standards needs to be corrected. Okay? Correct the squint and the suppression or eccentric fixation gets corrected. So under all categories, if you see a squint, refer to a physician and tell the parents this is a correctable abnormality and we will refer you to a person who can do that for you. First go and get your vision corrected and then we will see what to do from here. Don't tell them this is not correctable because the episode ends over there. He trusts you so much that he doesn't go to somebody else to ask for it. So our job here is to tell them there is something available. First get your vision corrected. We will see whether that available modality can be given to you and we will decide whom we send it to. Okay? Now what are the aims of treatment? Make the eyes straight, orthophoric in the primary position. Make vision equal in both the eyes and try and give stereoscopic vision to the patient. We may not be able to achieve all three endpoints, but we should try. We should try to give one by one whatever is written over there in that sequence. So first you make the eyes straight. Once they are straight, try to equate the vision, and once that happens, try to give them stereoscopic vision. When you equate the eyes and make them straight with good vision in both the eyes, you're giving them flat vision which is two-dimensional. The minute you talk of stereoscopic vision, it is three-dimensional vision. And we all know the benefits of three-dimensional vision. All this will come to you only if you treat the squint less than 6 years of age. Stereoscopic vision cannot be attained after 6 years of age. Okay, so earlier the squint you correct, the third modality can be corrected easily. Later you correct, you can only correct the first and the second. So as a responsibility towards our patient, we should see that the patient gets corrected before 6 years of age. Of course, if you have alternative fixation and all those things, after some years also, till 12, 13 also, you will get binocular vision. But most of the times you will lose binocular vision if you don't treat before 6 years of age. Okay? That doesn't mean if somebody walks into your clinic at 21, the first thing you tell him is now you can't get binocular vision. We know you can't get binocular vision, so we don't highlight it then. But if somebody comes to us below 6 years of age, you highlight it so that they go in for early treatment. We should not highlight things which we cannot treat. We should only highlight things which we can treat. So if somebody comes to you later on, tell them only 2 things can be corrected. Don't tell them third thing cannot be corrected. But if it comes before 6 years of age, emphasize that you have to do it now because otherwise stereoscopic vision will not be there. Okay? So what is the primary doctor's role? Get an eye referral, spectacle number correction, wear glasses for 3 months, review if the squint has decreased or it is the same. If it has not resolved, operate as early as possible to give maximum chances of getting binocular vision. Now here are a few cases. I don't want to go into the details of how it is done and how it is diagnosed. I'm just giving you a few cases which we have done where the preoperative the patient looked like this and after surgery how he has looked. So here you can see that the eye is out. So obviously it is exotropia, and after the surgery you can see that primarily the patient's eyes are straight. Another child, before and after, fully corrected. Now what I meant by alternatings, when you fix with one eye, now you can see the left eye fixing, the right eye squinting. When the right eye is fixing, the left eye is squinting. These are some of the cases which will have a little wider range for binocular vision even after 6 years of age, because they are been fixing at both points. But if you have uniocular squint, then binocularity will not be attained after 6 years of age. Here you can see before surgery, esotropia corrected after surgery. Okay? Here the eye is in, there it was out, but both the things you can see that they are orthophoric or they are straight in the primary position. Now it is not just the horizontal muscles which get affected, sometimes the vertical muscles also get affected. Now the vertical muscles get affected means the patient tries to tilt, because if we have a division of vision, like if you have 2 images in the horizontal, you can still manage to fuse over a large area, but if you have vertical, then you can't fuse, and if you can't fuse, you are going to tilt to make it equal. So whenever you see a patient with a tilt, it means he has a vertical component for squint. So you can see this patient, he has a vertical component for squint, and you can see that one of the eyes is overacting, and you can see the muscle in the left upper region overacting, as a result of which this has a vertical component along with the horizontal component, and post surgery you can see he's straight. So we can treat horizontal components as well as vertical components. It is not impossible to treat any type of squint. Okay? Another lady who has got horizontal as well as vertical component, pre-surgery, post-surgery. Sometimes you will see that it is a very variable squint. One eye is up, one eye is out. Extremely difficult. Some people told this child, nothing can be done. We treated him, he is absolutely straight. Everything can be done, and everything can be done very nicely, especially in children who are less than 6 years of age. This is a patient who had minus 26 diopters in the left eye, and the right eye was somewhere around minus 4. When you have something like minus 26 diopters, the eye is amblyopic. So this patient, we will only do cosmetic correction. And with cosmetic correction, we will even tell the patient that probably the eye will go out if the visual recovery is not maintained. Okay, so when you're doing cosmetic correction, there is always a possibility that there is a recurrence of squint. But when the vision is equal in both eyes, there is very less possibility that it will recur. So visual rehabilitation is a must to maintain the eyes in the primary position. All right? Now you see over here, the patient is trying to look up. In the left eye, the patient is unable to look up. So here, 2 vertical muscles are affected, and we have managed to correct the patient. So whether it is a horizontal component or whether it's a vertical component, all squints are treatable. Maybe we will not be able to achieve 100%. Maybe we surgeries. Maybe we will have to do it in 2 sittings. But end result we can deliver. 90% of the times the patient is fully satisfied. 90% of the times the patient's vision can be corrected. So it's my earnest request that if you have a patient who has squint, please refer. You can actually improve the behavior of the child, the scholastic backwardness of the child, and the social acceptance of the child. So as social ambassadors, I would say you will play a great role in doing it. And thank you very much for your patient listening.